Deadly Premonition is possibly the most unique horror game on Xbox 360, and if I had to sum it up in just a few words, I would say GTA meets Silent Hill meets Alan Wake meets RE4. So yeah, definitely an interesting experience. This is a pretty heavily story-driven game with many cutscenes, and I'll try to keep spoilers to a minimum for those who haven't played this game, but it's about an FBI agent by the name of Francis York Morgan, and he's sent to the town of Greenvale to investigate a brutal murder involving red seeds. But unlike previous cases he'd covered, this one involves a mysterious serial offender called the Raincoat Killer, who's shown on the cover of the European version, and it's York's job to bring this mysterious monster to justice through detective work and more than a little violence, plus some interdimensional travel as I can best describe it. Now, Francis has a dual personality who he likes to talk to named Zach, and this resulted in some pretty entertaining dialogue and a massive plot twist that I did not see coming. Actually, this game has a ton of plot twists. Possibly too many for its own good, as it did cause a wee bit of confusion, but I did not see many things coming and this game is full of surprises. Now I sadly had an issue recording audio, but for a dark, gloomy survival horror game, it actually had a lot of chill, laid back, and even funny moments in it, which really gave it some personality versus being all doom and gloom, and the story was very intriguing and very well written. And many subtle hints about upcoming events in the story were dropped every now and then for those observant enough to catch them. Now, apart from the main story, this game has a ton, and I mean a ton of side content, be it collecting trading cards scattered around the game with a $200 reward per card found, to side quests like paying the gas station owner for information or helping a possibly senile mechanic locate missing car parts. This game was pretty far out when it wanted to be. Or if you wanted to completely put the main quest and the side quest on hold, you could do things like go fishing, which was very interesting, and a cheap way to acquire supplies, like ammo or weapons, and there was even a story quest where you had to fish for a piece of evidence. Or you could go shopping and buy a new gun or a new car, or maybe you could just explore the town of Greenvale by going through people's homes for free loot or in search of collectible medals, which reward money for finding them. In a nutshell, this game has a crap ton of content to offer in its open world. But while talking about the open world, I must mention one of my biggest beefs with Deadly Premonition, and that is the super annoying map. From what I read online, this was a common gripe among DP players. You know how in open world games like Skyrim or Fallout, you have a map that's always right side up so that north is on the top of the screen, and how you can zoom out to see the entire map at once? Well, not on this game. In Deadly Premonition, you can barely zoom out on the map in a large open world game, which can make finding your way around town very hard, but the map also changes what side is at the top of the screen versus in most games where north is always at the top. This was insanely annoying and made me consider putting down the game early, but thank God I was able to find some fully zoomed out fan-made maps on Steam from the PC version, which I printed out to use while playing. A massive thanks to whoever put these together, y'all were lifesavers here. Other than the annoying map, there weren't many things that I disliked about the game, other than some frustrating QuickTime events and scripted running sections, where you had to rapidly wiggle the left joystick back and forth, with these sections often lasting over a minute, and it could physically be a little hard to do, especially towards the tail end of the game where you had to run down a massive flight of stairs, and for maybe 5 minutes it was just nothing but moving the left joystick left and right as quickly as you could, which wasn't particularly fun. But switching over to a positive, I want to talk about the combat, which takes place in the quote, red world, which feels inspired by Silent Hill, a real, normal world, and then a dark other world. But in the red world, you fight mostly zombie-like creatures who can teleport short distances and have a couple varieties. Some happen to be unarmed, some have melee weapons, and some have guns, with police variants having extra health. You have a decent variety of weapons to fight these weird beings with, like a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun, a submachine gun, an AR, a beefy revolver, a Bowie knife, swords, and a selection of makeshift melee weapons, like a crowbar or a lead pipe. But you also have an infinite ammo pistol to use in emergencies, or if you just want to save expensive ammo. Sure, it's weak, and it can take over an entire magazine to kill a single enemy in the later levels of the game, but it's quite handy, especially when you consider that bosses and wall crawlers, who I'll discuss in a second, can only be killed with ranged weapons, making an infinite ammunition pistol your fallback weapon a must-have, instead of something like RE4, where your infinite use weapon was a knife. Now, melee weapons deteriorate with use, and they vary in things like damage, swing speed, strength, etc. And my favorite hand-to-hand weapon was probably the shovel because of how well-rounded it is. As far as guns go, they also vary in things like ammo capacity, damage, rate of fire, stuff like that, and the pump action and the AR were probably my favorites. The shotgun for its decent damage, but also because it has a crap ton of spread, being able to hit multiple foes at once, and it can also knock over enemies with body shots. I believe this is the only gun in DP that's able to pull this off, and I like the assault rifle for its large magazine and good damage, which allowed you to spray and pray in situations where it was tough to lay down precise shots. As far as the combat itself goes, headshots were the way to go when possible, as headshots stunned enemies, preventing them from attacking or teleporting, but headshots also do more damage than body shots. And if you kill an enemy with a headshot, you get a cash bonus, in addition to getting dough for every enemy killed, regardless of how you do it. Okay, the wall crawlers, which I mentioned a second ago. They can only be unalive via ranged attacks, so melee is not an option. Now thankfully no more than one will spawn in at a time, but whenever they do decide to spawn, you're locked into a small area until you kill them, which means that you cannot just flee and escape. The strategy to beat them is pretty simple. Let them get close to you while invisible. You can't harm them while they're transparent, by the way, and they'll stop for a couple seconds to attack when they get close to you. Then you want to run away, turn around, and this is when they're vulnerable to your attacks, and I suggest using the pump action here, largely due to its large blast radius, and you just keep this up until the crawlers are dead. Now, my first ever encounter with these, I struggled so much I legit thought it was a boss fight, and it didn't help that I was using the SMG, which is the weakest gun in the game. I used almost all of my medical items and all of my ammo because I didn't understand how these opponents worked, but I thankfully got the hang of how to fight them without too much trouble after the first encounter. Something I guess I should mention while discussing fighting is that while using ranged weapons, you have to stand still to aim, shoot, and reload, leaving you vulnerable to attacks from behind. But melee weapons were a bit more forgiving here, as you had a lot more freedom of movement while using these. But like I said earlier, weapon deterioration, plus the risk of getting close to enemies. Cons and pros of both fighting styles, you know? On a somewhat similar topic to combat, I would like to transition over to talking about the inventory. The inventory is divided into a couple different sections, like a space for quest items, a space for weapons and ammo, and a place for consumables, like food and medical items. And you also had a toolbox with additional storage, which kinda just traveled around with you, and you could access it anytime that it was present, being mostly at safe rooms in the red world, while also being at stores and in your hotel room in the normal world. Now, in your personal inventory, you could only hold 4 weapons at once, with one of the slots being hogged up by your infinite ammo pistol. I was fine with this taking up a slot until later in the game when you had access to an improved infinite bullet sidearm. But you couldn't trade it with your weaker one, and it wasn't as good as most limited ammo guns, so I didn't really use it outside of a single mandatory quest where it was your only weapon. But thankfully, you can hold a lot of ammo for your normal guns, although it's not particularly cheap, but at least foes do drop you some rounds on occasion as loot. Moving over to the consumable part of your inventory, here you can hold small, medium, and large med kits, and you can hold 8 small, 4 medium, and a single large med pack at once, plus many more in your toolbox. You can also hold fishing bait and yummy food and drinks here, which are used to refill your hunger meter, your sleep meter, if it's a caffeinated beverage, and 1 or 2 items can even restore some lost HP. Oh yeah, this game has a food and health meter, requiring you to eat and sleep to live, and sleeping also restores health. Or it can just be used to pass some time if you have a quest that won't activate until, let's say, 8 PM in game, and you don't feel like doing side stuff, you can just take a nap and skip standing around waiting. Now thankfully sleeping areas and food items are super easy to come across, and safe rooms often have unlimited spawn points for snacks, plus your character eats food in cutscenes, which happens to replenish your food meter. I don't know what exactly happens if your HP or your sleep bars hit 0, but if you reach that point, you're either doing it intentionally or you're just really bad at the game. And even if you can't find food, most vendors sell it, and vending machines are sprinkled around the game, but they have bloated prices, like $25 for a single lollipop. Juliet Starling would have a heart attack, versus buying 5 pops from the Panda Bear store for $15. So it might be wise to do some price comparison while shopping. And while we're on the topic of shopping, I want to discuss the most terrifying, nightmare-inducing thing that Deadly Premonition offers, and that is having to pay $5 a gallon for gas! I get sweaty and nervous just thinking about it. If that isn't a scary thought, I don't know what is. Forget serial killers. Forget demented zombie monsters. $5 for a gallon is pure nightmare fuel. On a serious note, York does comment about how pricey gasoline is, and if you go to the sign for the gas station, it actually says that's $3.19 a gallon. I guess this is something the devs overlooked, or they just didn't think it all the way through. But yes, unlike most video games where your rides have unlimited fuel, DP gives you a limit, except for a couple main quests where it's infinite. I guess this was supposed to add some RPG elements to the game, but all it really did was make the game scarier. Whew, I can't tell you how many nightmares this game has given me about having to pay $5 a gallon for gas. Anyways, a couple other role-playing elements tossed into the game, aside from those already mentioned, like sleeping and eating, you also have to practice personal hygiene, like shaving and wearing clean clothes, and you can get a money penalty for smelling bad if your drip ain't clean. But you have 3 outfits by default with more purchasable, and it is super cheap to have them cleaned. Plus, you earn money for grooming your beard and wearing clean clothes, so there's no reason to not take care of yourself. And also, flies will buzz around York if he smells bad, so make sure to stay in a fresh outfit. You also have to manually save at phones around the game, which is usually free in the red world, but in the overworld it costs $1 per save. But you do get paid for saving sometimes, so it evens out. Plus, you get paid a fat wad of cash for completing every level, so if you run out of money, it's likely your own fault, as Deadly Premonition is always offering you ways to make a few bucks. Now, I would like to change topics and talk about the horror elements of this game, besides having to pay an outrageous price for gasoline. The horror lies largely in the story, again, trying to keep spoilers to a minimum, and you see some pretty gruesome things in the cutscenes, and I read somewhere that the original pitch for the game was even more disturbing, but it got toned down some. Also adding to the horror vibes are things like eerie music in the red world, creepy foe designs, plus the sounds that your enemies make, and they often mutter things like "Kill me," I don't want YouTube to get mad at me, or things like "don't want to die" after you deliver a fatal blow. Like I said earlier, I sadly had an issue recording audio, but the VAs for the enemies did great jobs at what they did, and I was genuinely scared at times, especially early in the game, but the horror effects did wear off some over time. Now, putting that aside, for a horror game that can be insanely grim and dark at times, it also has many funny and lighthearted moments like I stated earlier, being mostly dialogue and cutscenes, but it really made this game unique to me, as so many horror games are non-stop gloominess, and this game holds many wholesome or funny moments that made me chuckle a bit. Plus, sometimes while driving, characters would talk together, and it was always really entertaining to listen to them. Sometimes it was about the murder case at hand, sometimes about other things, but these moments really help DP have a lot of personality and make it feel more alive. Now, that being said, there were sometimes audio glitches where audio lines would stop playing mid-conversation, but I thankfully had the subtitles on, so this didn't really bother me. However, this game did have some other performance issues which were a bit more annoying. This game did crash on me once, but thankfully it was right after I had saved, so no real harm done, and the game could get super laggy at times, especially in split-screen sections where you encountered the Raincoat Killer. From what I read, the Xbox version is better performing over the PS3 and the PC versions, which is likely the reason why the 360 version released a month before the PS3 version did, and years before the PC port came out, if Wikipedia was correct. It makes sense to put out the best version of the game ahead of the not-so-good SKUs, that way it'll stand the best chance on the market if it gets a good impression from the superior version of the game, versus the less optimized port being out on day one. And graphically, the game, well, it doesn't look great, looking more akin to a late Xbox original era game than a 360 title, but this was likely to make sure that the game would even run, at least without massive load and rendering times. I would like to change over to discussing some smaller notes I have for this game, with the first being there was a level where you got to place the character Emily, plus another short section where you played as a third character, who I won't spoil. I felt it was okay to mention Emily, but the other character would give too much away, I feel. But it was cool having a break from playing as York, even though he's a really cool character in my opinion. As for the game length of this title, it's pretty beefy, and it took me roughly 22 hours to finish on the normal difficulty, doing only a few of the side quests. Another note is that this game has 3 interesting boss fights, with the first probably being my favorite, but I did not show the bosses as they all hold massive story giveaways. A couple other notes before I give this title a final grade is that you can't just load your past save if you want to go back to it for some reason while in the game. You have to completely exit the game and then reload your save from the main menu. Not a big issue, but it was a minor annoyance the couple times that I wanted to reload my save. And finally, for some reason I cannot explain, the pause menu makes me think of the main menu on Silent Hill Downpour. I have no idea why, it just does. Alrighty, all of this being said, I think Deadly Premonition earns a 9.3 out of 10 by my grade scale. Still not my favorite horror game on the console, but it is a underrated and lesser known one for sure. Anyways, as far as similar games that I can suggest, maybe Resident Evil 4 or RE the Mercenaries if you have a 3DS, or possibly even Silent Hill Homecoming. It's a little hard to name similar titles, as Deadly Premonition is pretty unique, but those are some games you could maybe enjoy if you like this title. And this game does have a sequel, which from what I've read isn't as good as the first game, but I might give it a try someday. Also, this game is backwards compatible on newer Xbox consoles, but I played it on my Xbox 360e and I got it digitally for $20 before the 360 store closed. And I believe that wraps up my review itself for today. As far as our Bible verse of the day, I read from 1 Corinthians 6:12 NIV. I have the right to do anything you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. And that is it for me for today, folks. Thanks for watching. I won't know for sure until I'm done editing, but this is possibly my longest game review to date, and it is certainly my longest Xbox 360 game review for sure. For any newcomers here, I mostly play, review, and discuss zombie and horror games, so feel free to watch some of my other vids if that sounds interesting, and follow me on Gameram if you want behind the scenes action, and hints and updates for upcoming videos. Like always, none of my content is made by AI, and I don't consent to my voice and likeness being altered, modified, or copied by AI in any way, form, or shape. Always remember that Jesus loves you all very much. Take it easy, y'all. Have a good one. Peace. Or maybe you could just explore the town of Greenvale by going through people's homes in search of